Hey, in this video, I'm going to teach you about how to use the backlink opportunity worksheet and find the best backlink opportunities for your website. So we're going to go over the actual sheet and what's included, but also talk a little bit more about different types of links and how to find them and how to categorize them and how you should use this to actually implement these strategies into your business. So first of all, let's just take a quick look here at the backlink opportunity spreadsheet. We have the domain. We have an example URL from that domain. We have the domain score, the trust score, and a rating. And then this list over here is just these all say idea. This is a way that you could categorize these, but we're not going to use that. You're going to use my ideas over here that I've made for you. All right. So you do want to pay attention to this rating. In some cases, the 5s and the 4s and sometimes the 3s are usually going to be your most qualified ideas. And this whole list is built by an algorithm that takes your keywords and your competitors and looks to see uh, where they're currently getting links and where they're mentioned across the web and what pages are extremely relevant to the exact topics that you want to rank for. And it gives you a list of the best opportunities to get links around those topics and similar to your competitors. Okay, so the higher the rating, the more likely it is to be very relevant for you based on those things. Now, the domain score and the trust score are given by SEMrush. Now, this is very similar to something like Moz's Domain Authority or Google's PageRank. And that would be the domain score would be like Domain Authority or PageRank. And usually those things are also in kind of including a trust score, and SEMrush separates these out. These are on a 100-point scale, and generally these scales are logarithmic, which means that something that is going to be in the 80s is way, way harder to get to. It's harder to get from 68 to 83 than it is to get from 0 to 50 probably. And so some of these, it's not extremely helpful in seeing how strong this domain is. And sometimes it doesn't even really matter because even if the domain is strong, a link on that domain may not be as strong. So take these with a grain of salt. It can be helpful in understanding the strength of a domain, but it can also be misleading in certain cases because of the type of link. So, all right, so let's go ahead and look at some specific examples. Now, what we're going to do is I've already opened some of these links in a browser over here, and we're going to go through what we would actually be looking for. And I made this sheet called My Ideas. And what this is going to do is let you categorize your backlinks and put them in a list, and you can assign it a value, the amount of effort that it's going to take. These are things that you're going to have to come up with on your own. I would recommend using a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how valuable do you think this link would be based on what you know about SEO and link building and in general, like how much traffic would it send? You can come up with what you think is the value on a scale of 1 to 10. The effort, like how hard is this going to be for me to get this? Come up with your own scale here as well. The cost, in some cases, these are going to be where you can actually pay for a directory listing or something like that. And there may be an actual cost involved or sponsorship or something like that. Put that here. Contact name, number, email, and even an address. So these are for if you need to reach out to someone to get this link. You're going to be looking for contact information. If you want to go visit this place to potentially ask about links, or more likely you're just trying to build a relationship, you might want to list an address. Username and password are for places where you need to sign up for an account to get a directory listing. You don't want to forget that in case you need to update it later. And then you have your own notes, and then you can put link obtained. If you end up getting it, you can put a date there so you know when you got that link. Okay, so let me go over the categories here that I've come up with. You could add different categories if you want, but these are the main types of links that I see as being possible and are I guess the most common types of links that photographers are going to be really trying to get. And I put these roughly in order of their value, but not directly. So, I mean, some of these could be off. Like you could have some guest posts that are more important than some vendor lists. It just kind of depends on some of these things, like the domain and the placement of the link and all of those things. But in general, the farther down on the list, the less valuable that link is going to be in general. Okay, so we have features. Now, features are whenever you get featured on another website, and generally this is especially easy for wedding photographers who can submit to magazines and bridal blogs and things like that. You use something like Too Bright Lights even, and get your work featured on these magazines and blogs. Those kinds of links are typically very valuable, especially if it is a very reputable website. So something like Style Me Pretty, getting featured in Huffington Post weddings, those kinds of things, even though that could be Huffington Post weddings could even generally be more of a credit if you're just one of the many photos that they list there. But features are typically where the article is about you, the photographer. It doesn't have to be something like a bridal blog. If you're not a wedding photographer, you can still get featured. You can get featured for the work that you do by a blogger in your city, or you could be featured because of some incredible work that you've done that someone thought was worth writing a featured post about. There's all kinds of ways to get featured. These are typically some of the most valuable links because they are directly talking about you and your business. Organically, it's not paid. It's not a sponsorship. It's, there's no, I'm linking to you because you're linking to me. It's, I'm linking to you because you are remarkable. You're worth writing about. And so those are very valuable. Vendor lists. So this is especially valuable, again, for wedding photographers where there are venues and vendors who have like a featured or recommended vendors list. You can get on to those, and if they have it on their website, it's even better. So if they have on their website, like, here are the photographers that we recommend, you can get on that list. That is a really good link, not only because it's very local and specific, but also because it's going to drive very qualified traffic to your website. If you're not a wedding photographer, you can still get on vendor lists for suppliers and other things, depending on how localized and how niche those products or suppliers might be. You could still get on other types of vendor lists. Credits. Now, this is probably one of the most popular ways to get linked as a photographer. It's one of the easiest. If you can get credited for your work. So let's say that a local blog uses your photo in a story and you allow them to use that for a link, and they link back to your site as a credit to you for taking the photo. That can still be a really valuable link. Some people are really against doing this because they don't want to give away their work. Some people, it's worth it for the link. Totally up to you, but these can be really valuable backlinks. Directories. Now, these are some of the easier links to get because you can usually just sign up for directories and you'll get a link back to your website. Some of these are regular followed links that pass authority and are from good websites. It's more rare to find that in the directory category. Usually these links will be unfollowed or no followed. And sometimes the directories can be a little spammy. So you have to really be careful and only sign up for quality directories. With directories, the rule of thumb is if this directory is actually useful for someone who is searching for a photographer, then it's probably worth getting a listing. If it's made as like some sort of SEO directory, or like the directory itself primarily targets photographers or vendors, it's probably not useful to someone actually searching, and maybe not worth even having a link. Again, just a rule of thumb. There are lots of exceptions to pretty much any rule. You have to use your judgment on those things. Guest posts, and this probably could even go above directories as a valuable link. It just depends on the type of guest post. So if you are writing an article for someone else and it showcases your authority and your article links back to your website, that can be a very valuable link. So some things you read about SEO may say that guest posting is dead or guest posting is not valuable. And they're really referring to an old practice of guest posting where you would take one article and like send it to a whole bunch of different low quality websites just to get it featured or just to get it listed somewhere. was more of a syndication than a guest posting. But if you're writing high quality posts for someone else that is very specific and unique content, you're not just copying something and pasting it on somebody else's website, guest posts can still be extremely valuable. So posting on, let's say, for example, that you are a newborn photographer and you know that there is a doula in your city that has a blog, and you want to write an article for this doula about birth photography or newborn photography, whichever, or even maternity photography. That kind of thing. If you talk about like why it's important to capture these moments, write content that is valuable to that doula's clients or her audience, then that can be extremely valuable for them and for you, and you can get a link back to your site there. Try to include natural links to your site in the content and not just in a bio area, if possible, when you're doing guest posts. Press releases. These, you can either go like the official press release route where you are literally just sending out a press release to all kinds of media outlets. You can also go a little more targeted with press releases and use this as something where you are looking at local newspapers, news stations, news websites, community websites, and thinking about something that you could do that would be worth mentioning on their website. I'll show you an example of this here in just a few minutes, where a couple of examples, and at least one of them is a little outside the box, but I still consider it to be in the press release category. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Videos. So this could literally be that you upload a video to YouTube and link back to your website in that description of that YouTube video. Even more valuable if it's not your account. So if someone else posted a video, don't just like try to trick this and like use a separate account. But let's say that your client uploads a video and links back to your website in the description as a credit. That's a valuable link. Probably not a followed link, probably not going to pass significant domain authority. You're not going to get the authority of YouTube passed over to your website because of that, but it's still a valuable social link. Contests. So sometimes there's photo contests you can enter and you get listed as a winner on their website with a link back to your site. Those could potentially be valuable. Sponsorships. Now, this is a little tricky because you have to be careful if you are trying to abide by Google's terms of service, which I always recommend that you do. And if you are paying for a link, technically, if you're paying for a link in any format, it should be no followed, and it probably should be disclosed. Now, it just gets a little blurry in some situations where you may be able to be listed as a sponsor on a website, and the fact that you're a sponsor is enough of a disclosure, and they may or may not follow or no follow the link. And the practice there, it just depends. Like if it's an advertisement in a sidebar and it's not no followed, then it's potentially going to be seen as a negative thing. It's not likely that you're going to get penalized for something like that. It's more like the link's just not going to count. Whereas if it's like let's just say there's a 5K and you're listed as a sponsor because you donated $500, and on the website they have a sponsor section and they link to your website. Like, is that going to hurt you? Certainly unlikely. But there's cases where those kinds of sponsor links can even be helpful. It just depends. That's why I put it way down at the bottom of the list. You have to be careful. Don't go spending a lot of money to try to get sponsor links because Google doesn't usually give them much value. But there are scenarios I've seen where it could be an incredible value, especially whenever you can be listed as a sponsor on an edu or .gov website. In those cases, those could be way up at the top of the most valuable links. It just kind of depends on the scenario. Comments and forums, these are both, I would say, at the very bottom, least valuable links, but still potentially worth pursuing to some degree. With comments, you have to be really careful because if you go out and comment on 100 different photography blogs or other photographers or other vendors or even news or any kind of website, and you leave a link there and it links back to your website, that's usually going to be a no-followed link, which it should be. And so it's not going to really actually help you as far as, giving you any authority. And if you start to get to a point where your link profile is way more heavily no-followed links than, if the balance is off, so you have more no-followed links than followed links, that can start to be a problem for your entire link profile potentially. And so you don't want to overdo this. Like, don't do it because it's easy and maybe it helps a little bit. Like, it's not like 1,000 comment links is going to be the same as one, great link from a feature or something. It doesn't work like that. So use this naturally. If you're going through some community websites and you see a place where your insight and your authority and your expertise can be helpful to the conversation and to the community, you should absolutely comment there and leave a link to your website. When used like that in a natural way, this is a very good part of a healthy link profile, and you should pursue those things. Forums are kind of the same way. Like, if you're just going to sign up for a forum to have a link in the bio and on the forums, there are still a few big photography forums and even other like wedding industry forums that follow those links. And it could be said that those do potentially pass authority. It's unlikely that they're actually helping anything, according to most SEOs. It's still a way. You'll see these forums come up in the link opportunity sheet pretty often. And what you want to look at that, the way you want to look at that is an opportunity to answer people's questions as an authority in a way that may be a long-standing link to your website that drives traffic. So if you answer someone on, Yahoo Answers or Quora or whatever it is, and they're asking about how to know whether your wedding photographer is too expensive, and you have the best answer and it's upvoted and you have a link to your website there and people can go and see that you're an authority, that may actually lead to more links or more features. People might ask you to write posts for them, or they may actually even hire you. So you have to think about the fact that sometimes it's worth being in front of people just so you have the opportunity to get in front of more people. Not necessarily to drive clients directly, but to also give you opportunities for networking. So lots of different things there that, again, they're at the low end of value for actual domain authority building. So now that we've gone over all of those, let's go ahead and actually dig into this a little bit and go through some of these links. So I've already opened some. I'm going to move this over so that we can see some of the things I've opened. Now this one, when I opened it here, so I'm opening this example URL in all of these, and we'll kind of go from there on what we would do with this. So in this one, this is a list of wedding venues. Now I think on this particular site, this is this one's actually from my website. One of the main target terms that I used to generate this was something to do with venues in Columbia, and maybe even venues in Lexington. And so it's going to have some pages that I probably want to appear on if I'm thinking about ranking for those terms. But in this case, I still see, it looks like Columbia photographers is a category here. So let's check that and see. Okay, so this is something. And so whenever you're looking at this kind of directory, this does look like it's meant for actual customers who are looking for photographers. And so it is a potentially useful directory. Sometimes you do want to pay attention to who else is listed here and see whether or not your brand fits within this type of directory. So maybe it's actually harmful in some cases for your brand to be alongside other brands that don't really match what you're doing. Or conversely, it could be extremely beneficial if you can stand out against the competition. So keep those things in mind when you're making your decision about whether you should sign up for a directory. But the idea here is, okay, let's see how it works, add your listing, whatever. You go through this and you try to find out. It looks like on this one, I looked at it before and There is a free version, so maybe it's worth getting a free link on this website as part of this directory. Let's go ahead and move on. And so, by the way, I would go over here in my ideas. I go into directories and I would put the name of that website, and the value is probably fairly low. The effort is really easy, so also low. The cost is free to, you could put the price of those things if you want. If you need to put any of this other information, you could. All right, so let's move on to skyway.net. This is a South Carolina website that's been around for a really long time, and it is fairly reputable. And they have directory listing here. And so they also have, so it looks like these are paid listings, and then maybe even free listings here. Let's see if we can, photographers in Columbia. It does look like, there's a good bit here. Let's see if we can find out how to get listed. Add info, maybe. Business websites, South Carolina Business Directory. So we go in here. I don't know if this is actually how we add it or not. Sometimes you really have to dig around to figure out exactly. So I see how you feature it there. It doesn't really tell me how to add. And so you may have to contact them or reach out to these people, or look into the featured ad. You could put here, you could be at the top, but there's only a few there. So if this is something that you want, you could potentially even put on there on your thing that we have one. Come up with the price, put it on here. So let me give you another thought on this. Actually, we're going to go to this next one, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking. So here, this is another directory that came up in my list. And notice on this directory that there are no listings in gold, no listings in silver, and one listing in bronze, and then everything else in the free listings. Okay, so you could definitely go ahead and get the free listing. It's not going to hurt anything. But whenever you're deciding, should you pay for a directory listing, if you have a budget to put towards this and you want to have at least a few, how do you decide which ones you want? Well, one of the things you can do is search for your primary keyword, and then see if any of these directories show up in the first few results. So, we have something like Wedding Wire, The Knot, Thumbtack. And then we have Yellow Pages. And down here, we finally do get expertise, and we get to We DJ. And notice that this is probably the second or third page. I have mine on 100 results, so I'm not sure exactly where it is. But it's on the second or third page, so it's possible that people could click through to this, and it could get some traffic. If you were in the silver or maybe even in the bronze category, you would be the first thing that people would see whenever they came to this. It could be worth, I think it's like $120 in this case for a year. If I had a budget to put towards advertising on a directory, this might be one that I would consider, since it does show up somewhere in the first few pages of Google, and it has very little paid advertising at a low price. So those are the kind of things that you really want to consider. I don't recommend just going and spending a ton of money and getting in a bunch of directories. It's not going to really help your domain authority significantly, but it does have some potential to drive traffic, and it is a good sign of a healthy link profile to have some of these directory listings. All right, let's keep on moving. Sometimes you'll come across things like this, where it's just a list of wedding venues, and you might think, okay, well, there's really nothing I can do here. But don't necessarily discount that completely. I'll actually show you an example here. So like if I look here and I see the Millstone Adams Pond as a venue, and then I look, it has provided by, and then Millstone Adams Pond. But if I show these photos, and like if I click on this one, look at this photo by Corey Potter Photographer. Look at there. It's one of my photos. Now, this is not a link to my website, and so its value is much less. But one thing I do want to note here is that sometimes the mentions of your brand on other websites, even if they're unlinked, can still be kind of considered in that same category as links. So at one time it was more important to have a link because Google really needed that to be able to find the site. But at this point, the index is able to keep up with these entity mentions. And so whenever Corey Potter Photographer becomes an entity, and then Google sees that entity mentioned on another website, it can say, hey, we know that this entity is mentioned all across the web, and here's one of those places. It counts kind of like a link. Again, don't get me wrong, it's not exactly the same. Just having your name mentioned somewhere isn't exactly the same, but it's still worth looking into if it's something that's easy for you to get. And so in this case, my strategy was, hey, let's just give this venue photos to do whatever they want with in promoting themselves, and say, hey, if it's appropriate, let me get credit for that photo. And they were good on doing that and mentioning my name whenever they submitted it here to the wedding spot. This is another directory. I'm not even going to go over this too much, just showing you another possible directory. This is a Vimeo video that has a link to a photographer's website here in the description. Now, you're not going to be able to get a link in this if you weren't the photographer, but you could use this to give you that an idea for what type of video and what type of description and what type of link your competition might have. This is Carolina's Nature Photographers Association forum. And so again, just showing you an example of something that came up on the list. You could put this in your forum list as a forum that you may consider joining if you're into that kind of thing and you think you can keep up with it. There are several forums that usually come up in the backlink opportunities. It's a place for you to potentially be involved if you're interested. Maybe just go in there and talk about a few things that you are an expert on, kind of get your name out there, set up a few notifications on certain topics. I wouldn't spend too much time on this, but it is something that can help you stay involved in education and learning in the community, and also potentially be a healthy link back to your site in some cases. All right, this came up as a idea in my backlink opportunities. And, this is one of those cases where, this is a link to a photographer's website because she's on the staff in the photography and the journalism department. So unless you're on the staff at the university, you're probably not going to get this link. But I left it up as an example because you can't just like leave it there and say, okay, well, never mind. You could use this as something on your idea list. You could potentially follow Denise here on Twitter. You could email her and just set up a meeting to talk about what they have going on at the at the university when it comes to photojournalism. Find out if there's any way that you can get involved there. That could be a really great contact to have. And sometimes you'll find ways to potentially get links on these bios. Like you could potentially find someone else's bio here at the university who somehow would link to your website. It's very unlikely, but you could go through these and just see, is there any way that I could potentially get it? Because any kind of edu or .gov link that you can get is going to be usually a very reputable, trustworthy link that Google is going to give a lot of value to. All right, so this is an article. So this is going to probably go into the press release category. This is not the out of the box one I'm telling you. That's the next one. But in general, notice that this is just linking, or not even linking to this photographer. But again, it mentions their name, their brand fully like this. And so that could be valuable even in that kind of credit. A link would be preferable, but sometimes these can still be valuable. And basically, this was just someone who took a photo and submitted it to this newspaper. And that person may have even worked for the newspaper. I'm not sure. All right, so this is the one that's a little more outside the box. So this is what I consider to be a press release, but it's very specific to, the situation. So this is photography students' work displayed at Ann Leavitt's exhibit at the Columbia Museum. So this is a university, and two Winthrop University students met with Annie, and they displayed their photographs during this event. And so what's happening here is that because these are students or alumni of this school, the school thought it was interesting enough to mention this in an article. So this is the kind of very specific targeted press release that can be valuable if you have these kinds of connections, or you have something that's interesting to your community or anything that you are part of, and you could, just write up something that they can publish that says, hey, look, this is interesting. People would like this. That can be valuable. Now, this doesn't even link to them. I don't even know if they are actual photographers, but they are students. So if they were photographers, maybe they would be linking to their websites. You can get links in these kinds of articles. Again, this would be an EDU link. So that's something to think about. If you're an alumni and and they like to feature students on their website, consider doing a press release for your school. Now, this is a feature, basically. Meet the photographer who captured the Confederates' flag removal. And this does link directly to his blog. Now, this is, if you're in the photojournalism, this is a great example of getting featured. And it's not necessarily the typical photojournalist link credit. This is a photo contest. Again, this is not an extremely valuable link, but it does give you details on how to enter this photo contest. And you can go through here and you could look at the previous winners. It doesn't link to their websites in this case. Again, just this is a .gov website. This is why I thought it was worth highlighting. Photo contests aren't always valuable, but if you could find one that's on a .gov website that's giving a link to the winner's website, that could be very valuable. So it's just a matter of finding those opportunities if they're out there. And finally, we had a couple of venue and vendor websites that came up in the list. So Applause Catering. So it's just a matter of looking through here. It's especially good if the person has a blog. If this other vendor or venue has a blog, then it's very likely. And look, this one hasn't been updated since 2015. So what if you have done any work with this vendor and you said, hey, I've got some great photos from one of your events, and I would actually even like to write a blog post for you to put on your blog, a guest post. And so since they don't have any content since 2015, it'd be a great win for them if you would write them a short article. It looks like their article here was only 100 or 200 words. And if you said, I'm going to include a couple of my photos, and then I want to link to my website in this article that I'm writing, and instead of just linking with a credit, in that case, you could use text, and you could say, something like Columbia Wedding Photographer, and you could link that back over to your site, and that could be an extremely valuable local link. So this is a really good opportunity whenever you find a blog that hasn't been updated, or even if it is updated often, that shows, hey, they're looking for content. Make their lives easier by giving them content, and they will be very likely to link to you if they don't have any kind of restrictions or exclusivity or anything like that. Venues, same thing here. Same opportunity applies. If you look at their blog, this is one that I worked a lot with when I was doing full-time wedding photography, and you can even see some of the stuff that they've posted here. I took this photo. And then my relationship with this venue was, this is one of the primary catering companies actually, but they own one of the most popular venues as well. But my relationship with them was very casual, and to the point where I did headshots for their staff and shots for their advertising. And I never charged them anything for that because they sent me so much business. I probably got over $100,000 worth of referral business from them as a photographer, because they were, they have a premier venue, and they work with so many different venues as caterers. And I had several people in their office who love to talk about me. That kind of relationship is invaluable. So that's the kind of opportunity that comes from looking for people who need something that you can offer as a photographer, and not being so uptight about your photos that you have to get a logo on all of them, or you have to get a link. If they use some of these photos without crediting me, like in this case, I don't care, because they sent me so much business that credit doesn't even matter at this point. So sometimes you have to look at the bigger picture as well. I think I had one more on here, and this was just another really local newspaper that didn't have anything on their blog for a long time. You could probably send them pretty much anything that was interesting to the community, and they would publish it. So lots of opportunities, and all of that came from just going through this list and opening up these links and seeing what I could find. And there's a lot more on here. You have to weed through it. Sometimes these are, less valuable, and there's some things that you're not going to want on here, and that's totally fine. Look for the opportunities, and hopefully after this video, you'll have an idea of the kinds of things you're looking for, and you'll be able to set up a list of targeted opportunities for you to pursue and be able to go ahead and get those links to your site. All right, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.